Hello everyone, this is Lana Thomas. It is March 20th, 2020, and I just wanted to do some review and do this video in adjacency to the video that I have done online with regard to citing pictures, video, that different types of things of the protests that have been taking place in the last, particularly the last 2 years, but emphatically within the last year and coming into 2020 as well. The notes that I had put in there indicating the degree of them is just brief. So I wanted to go beyond that just a little bit and to point out to you what the Council of Wisdom has been pointing out to me. And that's my primary reason for sharing, is we're all trying to understand what's going on. And the fear is so overwhelming that I think if a person can just understand that it can be where things are being controlled, even though it's outside of our control, and it may not be something we're totally comfortable with, that we can maybe relax a little bit. I'm going to read some notes to you because it's just easier and makes it a little bit more understandable to you and to myself as well. But I'm just citing some different things online: Washington Post, Time Magazine, the Voice of America radio and online, and the specifically what's being said looks like a common theme between that and even all of the emphasis of like a search I did on Wikipedia, which was protests in 2019. Brings up all this criteria of the different things that are happening and the magnitude with which they're escalating. And so at that point, then I'm going to point out some of the things and then bring it all around to a point of what the Council of Wisdom has to say about that. And maybe something that can give you some really concrete information, a book offer that I have that is something that they have pointed out, explained this to me somewhat prophetically in 2006 when I wrote it. And it's just been an idle file on my computer. So here we go. The escalation of the public protests around the globe are on the rise. Abnormally large numbers of high-profile protests. According to the Washington Post, 2019 is declared the year of the protester. Wikipedia cites 47 countries seeing an intense outcry for justice, health care, fair-priced energy, lower-priced gasoline, climate change in the U.S., women's rights, Black Lives Matter, and all around the world, issues are being brought forward. A lot of what they pointed out to me is that sometimes as our economy was increasing and was getting better, people get comfortable and they have more confidence, and then they begin to realize they feel that they've been empowered a little bit by their financial prosperity, or even if they're not prosperous, that it has moved up to some degree. So people begin to feel more confident in themselves, and they also begin to look around when they're less concerned about grubbing out, a weekly paycheck. Maybe they should kind of reach out and do something about some of the problems in the world and be active, take action instead of just sitting idly by watching TV all the time. So the grievances that they have seem to be pretty consistent across the board. Now, according to, her name is Mira, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, Heberning, the head of the Asia research of Versick Maplecroft tells Time Magazine, stagnating incomes, growing income equality, corruption, the loss of faith in the established elites, and the erosion of the civil political rights were among all of the concerns that activated people to protest in the 47 countries, although to varying degrees. Those issues have boiled over in 2019, but they are deeply entrenched, and it's going to be hard for governments to address them. She stated policymakers across the globe have mostly reacted with limited consciousness or concessions and a clampdown by security forces, but without addressing the underlying causes. And that was reported by Time Magazine with Sierra Nugent in October of 2019. Now, I wanted you to note that they said they have a clampdown of security forces, but without addressing the underlying causes. That becomes a crux of the issue in 2020. Those issues are still there, and people have begun to take a serious look at what they would like to see changes taking place in that. Now, According to the Voice of America, global protests in 2019, demonstrators around the world demand reform. Now, around the world, I'm just going to go briefly some of the countries that are mentioned here because it's really significant. And rather than reading all of the headlines, just some brief things. The major thing: corruption, poor economies, political autonomy, and personal freedom are among the many issues driving demonstrators' demands for reform around the world, such as in Algeria. The president announced his intent to run for a fifth term. An estimated 3 million protesters in Algiers demanded a complete overhaul of his regime. He resigned in April. In Bolivia, after elections in October, Bolivians in La Paz protested claims of election fraud against President Evo Morales. In November, Morales announced his resignation and fled to Mexico. In Chile, protesters began in October in the capital of Santiago over proposed hike in subway fares. Protests soon spread around the country, with Chileans demanding income equality, better health care, and more money for education. At least 22 people have been killed. Colombia, protests in Colombia. Czech Republic, more than 200,000 people in Prague demanding the resignation of their prime minister against allegations of fraud. Ecuador, even Egypt, rare protests were held in Cairo, Alexandria, and several other cities in September 20th through 27th, accusing top officials of using public funds for personal fortunes. More than 4,000 people, including 11 journalists, and more than 100 children and foreigners were arrested. France, the Yellow Vest protesters in March on Champs-Élysées Avenue in Paris. France's Yellow Vest protesters remain a force to be reckoned with 5 months after their movement started. Haiti, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Russia, all of them basically saying pretty much the same thing: corrupt governments, inequality in pay, inequality in services, and lack of poor health care, things that people just deserve to have, and they know that they deserve it. And so with the uprising of people's opinions and them actually taking some action with regard to it, what's happening is that the governments are beginning to get a little uneasy. So in looking at that from the perspective of what the Council of Wisdom has been sharing with me, they're stating that in this situation, when things get that volatile and when there's so much of a global activity with regard to that type of thing, that governments get nervous, really nervous. And they try to understand, especially after 7 countries have their governments have been toppled, what they can do to protect themselves. Because you see, we as citizens, in the viewpoint of most political regimes, regardless of the country, regardless of the location in the world, is that we should be pretty much civilized with regard to our obedience to the law and order that has been presented to us. When people begin to make a stand and they begin to publicly, sometimes violently, display their disfavor for what's going on politically, those political officials try to begin to examine what can be done to quell the anxiety, to quell the fervor. And it just seems as though something like when a global movement like this, with so many countries involved, so many upset people complaining to their governments and stomping their feet in the streets, that maybe they're thinking we should figure out some way of maybe on a global scale quelling this, and on a global scale trying to learn to what degree we can control people and regain control before this escalates to the point where we can't handle it anymore. Now, when I talked to the council about it the other day, they said this is strictly a man-made mess, that it has been created. However, whether the virus itself was created or it was an opportunity, that they thought this is something we can move on. I mean, you get visions of, I do, in looking at how intense this type of thing can be and how easily manipulated a situation like this can be. That all government heads, in cooperation with one another, have this little Facebook page. Now, this is just, I'm just joking, but they have a little Facebook page where they all get together and they talk about what can we do to quiet this down? What can we do to regain control? What can we do to save our jobs and our positions? What can we do to make people understand that civil disobedience will not be tolerated? The only thing that they've been able to use throughout the centuries, or not the only, but one of the most effective things that they have used throughout history is religion. Now, religion in the manner that it is presented as there is some head of this, some godlike image, or persona at the very top of this, who's checking everything off and marking things like Santa Claus, saying, you're going to be good and you have to behave yourself, and judgment ensues if you don't. The end result of that whole thing that's been given to us and fed to us through our churches, through the elite, through our governments for so many centuries, is that ultimately it comes down to a fear of death. If we fear death because we fear judgment, then all those things hold us within a position of feeling responsible to just basically be obedient, like we would expect our children to be obedient in our homes and to show respect. And when there's that many rallies, that many protesters, that many violent, even like in Ferguson, Missouri, with the war, the fires in the streets, cars being burned, buildings being destroyed. I mean, something has to be done in order to contain that. But this type of thing on a global scale, when I looked at it, I think it's totally a man-made mess, because as a spiritualist, I'm trying to understand, is this a judgment from God that they've been teaching us, that somehow or another we're going to have to deal with all of our inadequacies, with all of our failures, with all of our the abuses of our planet, the abuses of one another, and all the things that we see around us, the hate, the anger, the greed, the selfishness, and those things that exist on a global scale. But I didn't feel like it was something, as I'm hearing the word Armageddon, I'm hearing the word apocalypse an awful lot, and I just don't see it as that. It didn't make sense to me, because we are actually getting to the point where many people are raising their consciousness and their level of intelligence is higher, and they're trying. And the fact that we're in the streets trying to make a difference is an indication to me that we are trying hard. So when I asked the Council of Wisdom about it, they reminded me that I had written a book inspired by one of a very reputable guide that I had, that asked me to write a little book called The Book of Pagan Proverbs. And at the time, because I had always enjoyed reading the Proverbs in the Bible, I thought, I was very intrigued by it. Well, as I began to write this book, I realized that more intensely than I knew, that the realm of guides and angels and beings on the other side, their intellect is so amazing. And what they did was they presented this book of Proverbs as written in an ironic manner, in a sarcastic manner, which sort of mimics the little books that we have out there, such as the Rosicrucians, where they have the secret book, that type of thing. And then if you're favored by God, then all of these wonderful things will happen to you if you understand how the secret works, and if you learn how to manipulate it, and to manipulate God, in essence. So this book is written in a manner that what it's presenting is what I want people to understand, is that it's presented in the way that it puts forward what those dictums would be, what those dictates would be, what their motto would be of a pagan group or organization, which is essentially going to be our governing bodies, our elite, our academic elite, the media elite, the primarily political elite. That this is how they view their world, and this is how they retain their power, and this is how they utilize all of us as essentially serfs in order to keep us working. So if we're not working, we're going to suffer from the aspects of right now of even 2 weeks of being quarantined or in isolation and not being able to go to work. And even though we're promised that they're going to help us, it will be more than likely inadequate. And the problems in the stock market, it always comes down to, if you manipulate the stock market well enough and cause some sort of crash, that those people who are feeling comfortable because they've done a little bit better in the stock market, and so they feel like they're not quite so threatened, and then they get concerned about others and they try to reach out. If the stock market crashes and people lose as a result of it, then, like always, those people who didn't lose money come in and scoop up what has been relinquished by people and lost, and then profit from it. But as they're presenting it in this book, it's put forth in a manner that is just a way of keeping control. If they take away a little bit of money, then we have no choice but to go back and begin grubbing every single day, trying to make a living, trying to make ends meet, and doing it on a paycheck to paycheck basis. 2 weeks for most people could mean they lose their homes. So we're very vulnerable at this point, and the fear that's out there for me is something that I just feel compelled to say something about. To use fear to that extent that they have people locked up in their homes and they're not able to go out, such as in France, people being arrested for strolling outside of their homes. Yeah, the different issues that are being presented by this are very disturbing, very, very disturbing. And so if we can understand that as a political move and not as a judgment of God and not as something where we have to be so terrified of a virus that if you look at the statistics, really, it's a flu-like virus. And I don't want to dismiss the relevancy of it or the magnitude of it, but by the same token, we have so many people every year afflicted by flu-like viruses, and naturally the weaker of us will pass. But if you look at it catastrophically, our hospitals in the United States kill 150,000 people a year by accidents or by inappropriate medications or surgical procedures. And we're not terrified to go to the hospital as a result. I mean, it's just sort of like logically bring it down to a manageable place. So if you are interested in learning more about what they presented in this book that talks about, say, for instance, one of the verses in the book of Pagan Proverbs said that the elite will be found, they will be tried for crimes, but then this will smack up a little bit of irony, they will be acquitted, or if they are not acquitted, then their charges against them will be so minimal that it won't affect them financially or even emotionally, that they're protected. If we go to war, such as we are, their family doesn't normally stand on the front. But our children are sent as soldiers. Our children are sent to fight. So it's like an elitist program that's put together in the way that they would perceive it and how they really secretly but so overtly practice this that we don't even seem to look at it as something that might be very injurious to us and very limiting to us and very unfair, very, very unjust. So like I said, it's not written in a condemning, awful way where, like the conspiracy theory and the pounding type of thing that we're feeling all around us all the time. This is just put together to make you think, make you understand what's really happening globally, and it's been going on for centuries. So I have made the book available on my website, and that's at launajthomas.com, and it's called The Book of Pagan Proverbs. And I'd really like to have you examine, go in and download it and see what you think of it. And maybe in the hopes that it can just bring us back down to some sense of peace and understanding that which is controlling this whole situation maybe controlled it and started in the first place, and so the control is not out of our hands if we don't relinquish it. So I'm just saying, stand up instead of sitting quietly by and hiding behind, peeking out the curtains of your house to see if you're going to be okay, or worrying about your neighbor that has this virus. We face viruses all the time, and our immune systems are strong, and they are designed in order to protect our bodies. That's the way that they're designed, miraculously and beautifully. And like I said, the number of people who died from flu, unfortunately, is a number that exists in our planet. So I'm just trying to present, just take a breath, just breathe and relax. And the fear is so overwhelming and so consuming that it's going to destroy a lot of people's lives, and it's going to incite riots, and it's going to cause problems. And we can just maybe circumvent that by just knowing and understanding, and stop listening to social media all the time that is just dragging us down and not uplifting us. Take a breath and breathe and know that we are taken care of, and know that we are going to be okay. And there's a time of strife right now, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. Please consider taking a look at that book, and I think it will be very enlightening for you. And share it with friends, and please share this video with friends. And hopefully it will bring things back to a little bit calmer place. Even if it's for a few thousand people, then to me I will feel as though I have made a contribution in this. I am not afraid. And I have so many beings telling me and backing me. And like in the other videos that I've presented on YouTube, that we are being taken care of and looked out for. And there are changes coming to our planet, but they're good changes. And it's not apocalypse, and it's not Armageddon. And if you even look at the definition of apocalypse, like I said in my last video, it means to lift the veil. which means where truth is being exposed to us, being shown to us, where we can understand our world better, we can understand ourselves better, and our need to be the best that we can possibly be. And to be living in fear, there's nothing good about that. Absolutely nothing good about that. To allow that type of thing to destroy who you are and your confidence and your whole structure of life is so misfortunate. So I'm just saying, we reach out to one another, we lift each other up, we do whatever we can to quell the fears and not feed the fires, and let people know that they, there's always somebody that's at the helm, and they may not be the people that we think are best for it, but be aware, stay on your toes, and do not let this overwhelm you, and find strength in your faith, and find strength in your own self and what you know you're capable of, and we can rise above. And I'm just saying to you that we are loved, and we love one another, and we get through this just like we have so many other things. So take care of yourselves and take care of your families and love one another. And again, go to my website, LanaJThomas.com, sign up for my newsletter while you're in there, and you'll be getting updates from the Council of Wisdom. And let's do whatever we can to support one another through this and make it last as small and short a pot time as possible. So thank you again for listening, and thank you for sharing this video. Until next time.